Part 49. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 481. Several strong, fierce-looking men came over. Their bodies had a strong smell of blood, and the murderous intent they exuded made Zhu Leng frown. And several people happened to sit next to Zhu Leng. Others gathered around saw this scene. He was immediately frightened out of his wits and hurriedly left here, as if he didn't want to sit with these people. But when several big men saw this scene, they sneered, said coward, then patted the table and shouted, "Serve the dishes, bring the best meat here one by one." When the boy standing not far away heard this, he swallowed his saliva, came over embarrassed, and said with a smile on his face, Okay, some guests, please wait a moment." After saying this, he left here immediately, as if he didn't want to stay here for a moment. But the big man just looked at him with disdain and started talking to a few people around him. But the conversation was full of dirty words. It was nothing more than which woman I slept with yesterday, how many people I killed, etc. When Zhu Leng, who was eating meat, heard this, he slammed his chopsticks on the table with a trace of disgust in his eyes and snorted coldly. These guys are really annoying. They talk about all kinds of things. The Bing Jiao in the dark chuckled lightly when he heard this, and said comfortingly, "You have to get used to this, but there are countless people like this in the 10 realms, so you don't need to care what they say." Zhu Leng puffed up his mouth and replied, "Senior, that's not what I meant. It's just that these dirty words they said really made me feel a little uncomfortable, let alone in front of me." Bing Jiao smiled and teased, "What? Is it possible that you still want to avenge the injustice and take action against them?" Zhu Leng nodded, "What else?" He glanced at the people on the side with cold eyes. "Besides, these guys are not good people at first glance. If I kill them, it can be regarded as eliminating harm for the people." Seeing this, Bing Jiao shook his head and said nothing more. Anyway, as long as he wasn't looking for death, he didn't bother to care. Finally, after half an hour, the big men seemed to have almost eaten and were ready to leave. He casually threw a piece of middle-grade immortal crystal on the table and left here with his arms crossed. Not looking for trouble out of nothing. But at this moment, there was a sudden commotion in the sky. The next moment, a fireball as big as the sky fell from the sky and headed straight towards Liang City. The terrifying momentum attracted the attention of the whole city. Zhu Leng, who was enjoying his meal, heard the sound and stopped, put down his chopsticks and looked out the window. Suddenly, his face showed a hint of surprise, and he opened his mouth wide. What is this? What a terrifying power! Didn't you say that Liang City won't be attacked? Seeing this scene, the ice dragon in the dark looked anxious and shouted quickly, "Boy, don't worry about this, run away quickly. If my guess about this fireball is correct, it should be the power of the ancient saint." "What? The powerful ancient saint?" Zhu Leng looked startled, but he didn't have time to think too much and rushed out of the restaurant at an extremely fast speed. At this time, people on the street also began to run away. But this speed can't avoid the range of the fireball. The ice dragon hiding in the dark gritted his teeth when he saw this. "Boy, let me help you." As soon as he finished speaking, a flood dragon silhouette suddenly appeared behind Zhu Leng. Flood dragon roared angrily, lifted Zhu Leng with its sharp claws, and turned into a stream of light and left Liang City. When he reappeared, he was already on top of the mountain. At this moment, only the top of the fireball was visible. A middle-aged man wearing a water cloud robe appeared there. He put his hands behind his back and looked down with emotionless eyes, as if the creatures in the city were just like crushing a bunch of ants to him. Seeing that the fireball was about to destroy the entire city, he squinted and smiled. "Enjoy what the fireball brings to you." Before he could finish his words, Two figures of middle-aged men who were completely powerful appeared under the fireball. I saw the two men burning their souls, hammering the ground, and with a roar, a huge wall rising up to 1,000 feet rose from the ground. The laws of earth around him are constantly rolling. The next moment, huge walls began to appear one after another. All the houses in the city began to collapse, and huge boulders were seen intersecting with each other like vines until the entire city was sealed. The middle-aged man's laughter stopped abruptly. Falling into gloom, he clenched his fists, looked at the two daoist figures below, and gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it, I originally wanted to use a city of creatures to open the gate of chaos and escape from here, but here you are." He exhaled slowly, and a black jade sword appeared in his hand. The middle-aged man seemed to have made up his mind. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, his eyes showing shock. "The best thing to do now is to escape quickly and don't worry about Dong Yi. Die. Rumble. If this fails, then there is really nothing he can do." The phantom turned into a huge sword in the sky, and with supreme holy power, it rushed towards Liang City below again. Snort. He raised his sword and looked at Liang City below. "Since you just blocked the fireball, can you block this move? It's such a bad thing for me." Suddenly, he found that the mountain peak under his feet was shaking violently. "Is this the top powerhouse? Just the air wave from the collision caused me serious injuries." The middle-aged man's face showed anger. After releasing this move, the middle-aged man spit out a mouthful of blood and knelt down on the ground with a weak expression. "Ah! Cough. Zulen nodded obediently. The fireball also hit the boulder at this moment. High in the sky, a middle-aged man stepped into the void, looking at Liang City enclosed by huge rocks with murderous intent in his eyes. Boom! After the words fell, the middle-aged man opened his hands. This airflow directly shattered his internal organs, and he spat out a mouthful of solid scarlet blood. This time he miscalculated. Then, the middle-aged man shouted. Before he could make any move, another terrifying wave of air swept over him and knocked him to the ground. And under his influence, the laws of this area began to slowly vibrate until they were used by him. Huge flames swept over the boulders, setting off a powerful wave of air. Even Zulen, who was standing on a giant peak not far away, felt it. Hoo. He did not insist on observing this battle between strong men, but stayed far away. It's okay, then he reminded in a voice, "Okay, boy, don't look anymore. The battle of these powerful men is not something you and I can watch." The next moment, an extremely powerful sword silhouette appeared behind him. Bing Jiaoxin, who was in the space, also raised his throat, but seeing that Zulen was only seriously injured and nothing serious, he breathed a sigh of relief. This was a blow he unleashed with all his strength. Except for Liang City, all the trees and ground were cracked and broken by this powerful air wave. Black mist appeared in his eyes. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 482. Liang City, under the boulder. The two of them have already felt this power. Their eyes flashed with solemnity and they swallowed a pill. In an instant, the magic power in the two people's bodies surged and flowed out like the waves of the Yangtze River. At this moment, Liang City, which was originally wrapped in huge rocks, began to slowly open like a palm, and quickly condensed in the next moment. With a roar, the boulder rushed into the sky like a pillar of strength, and all the boulders seemed to be attracted by something, and they all stuck to the tall boulder. In a blink of an eye, all the boulders merged into a god of war wearing armor. Boom, the god of war moved slightly, and the huge sound shook the world, as if the world could not bear his breath. The next moment, the god of war's eyes were slightly ferocious, and his mountain-like palms clenched tightly, turning into a huge fist. Looking at the approaching giant sword, the god of war raised his arm, unleashed all his momentum, and aimed at the giant's sword. Boom! When the two collide, dust and smoke are scattered, and the laws are in chaos. The sound was deafening and resounded throughout the world. The air wave that erupted this time was even more terrifying, and the earth with a radius of thousands of miles was instantly shaken to pieces. Countless mountain peaks that were originally neatly arranged were all turned into ashes at this moment. Countless innocent people and monsters were buried there. After a few breaths, the dust and smoke slowly dissipated, and the god of war's body began to fall apart until he fell to the ground in pieces. And under the full blow of the god of war, the giant sword in the sky had exhausted all its mana and was unable to move forward. It turned into glittering golden light and disappeared in this world. Seeing this, the middle-aged man high in the sky had a distorted expression, gritted his teeth, and finally a hint of helplessness flashed across his face. After performing this trick on his own, there is no other way. What's more, it's the ancient sage who is no different from his own strength. When everyone in Liang City saw this scene, their trembling, panicked, and fearful hearts finally relaxed. The people who had been running away just now began to gather slowly and came to the square of Liang City, looking up into the sky. They were glad that Liang City was protected by top experts, otherwise they would have all died here under that attack. Thinking of this, everyone looked at the two people not far away. His eyes were full of gratitude and admiration. What's more, he was already kneeling on the ground with his legs. The tone was full of gratitude to the two of them. However, the two of them didn't pay attention to this. Instead, they frowned and looked at the man high in the sky. They didn't understand why this man attacked them in Liang City for no reason. After thinking for a moment, the two of them didn't think of anything. Then the man in white on the left pointed at the middle-aged man in the sky and asked angrily, "Who are you? Don't you know where this place is? How dare you attack my Liang City for no reason? Now is the time when our human race is preparing for the demon race. Do you want to provoke a fight among the human race by taking action at this time?" Hearing this, the middle-aged man smiled disdainfully, glanced at him, with a cold expression on his lips, and said in an indifferent tone, "What does it have to do with me when humans fight? If I want to destroy a whole city of life, do I still need you to take care of it? If you want to take care of it, then if you have the ability, challenge me to a one-on-one fight. If you beat me, then we'll talk about it." You. Hearing such arrogant words, the man in white immediately became angry. Before he could refute, the man in black next to him stopped him. "Yuan Ping, don't do anything yet, wait for me to test him." Hearing this, the man named Yuan Ping could only put down his hand, suppressed his anger and nodded, "Okay, be careful." The man in black looked at him solemnly, and his figure appeared high in the sky. He didn't take it to heart either. Seeing the person coming, the middle-aged man raised his eyes and looked at him, his expression unchanged, but there was a trace of vigilance in his eyes. He couldn't figure out the details of the person in front of him. There must be some premeditated plan to attack Liang City for no reason. He used all his strength to turn his head and glance at the black shadow, and pointed at him with a weak expression. "Feng Yun from Liang City, I wonder which force you are from? And why did you attack Liang City? Has our Liang City offended you somewhere? I think if they hadn't made good friends with the Soul Palace Protector in Liang City, otherwise the city would have been destroyed by the two major forces." There was a confrontation with the middle-aged man. Could it be that just because Profound Heaven Sect is strong and one of the top forces, it can use its power to bully others and attack weak forces? Finally, the man in black took a deep breath. He had naturally heard of the force Profound Heaven Sect. If this person is from Profound Heaven Sect, what is the premeditation to attack Liang City? Thinking of this, confusion suddenly flashed through his heart. Yuan Ping below saw this and his expression suddenly froze. If that's the case. Ah! Then he forced a smile on his cold face, raised his hands and asked. Fen Yun's chest was instantly penetrated by thunder, his internal organs were scattered on the ground, and he spit out a mouthful of thick blood. The next moment, the nearby space fluctuated, and in an instant. You are from Profound Heaven Sect, so I will remember it. When the day comes, I, Fen Yun, will report this matter to Profound Heaven Sect and tell you everything you did to me in Liang City today. Hearing this, the middle-aged man still looked at him indifferently and laughed strangely. After all, more than 10 years ago, the master of the Profound Heaven Sect fought against the domain master. Who in the 10 domains didn't know about it? But what impressed him most was the Soul Palace and Shadow Palace that attacked his Liang City a few years ago. Haha, you can tell me, I did say that I am a Profound Heaven Sect person, but that does not mean that I am still a Profound Heaven Sect person. Before he could finish his words, the black shadow crushed his neck and then threw it on the ground casually like trash. What do you mean? Fen Yun frowned. Hearing this, Fen Yun's face was shocked, and his eyes were slightly suspicious and surprised. You. Hearing this, the middle-aged man glanced at him, curled his lips slightly, and joked, what if I say that I am from the Profound Heaven Sect? Finally, he reacted immediately and ran over to catch Fen Yun's fallen body. Although this person was weaker than him, the strange aura of this person made him a little confused. He raised his eyes and glanced at the calm middle-aged man, feeling furious in his heart, so what if he was a powerful person? Then he asked. What? Before he could resist, the black shadow condensed the terrifying lightning law and aimed at his back. Feeling the breath behind him, Fen Yun's heart tightened. A black figure instantly appeared behind Fen Yun. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 483. Looking at Fen Yun's lifeless body, he shed tears, his eyes were red, and his face looked sad. Old friend, how did you die? Yuan Ping choked with sobs and knelt on the ground with both legs. When everyone in the city saw this scene, they couldn't help but clenched their hands secretly. At this time, Liang City's city lord's palace. A man with a tall figure and a great appearance seemed to sense something, and the pen he was writing suddenly broke. His eyes trembled, and he quickly stood up and looked outside. Then the figure turned into a hurricane and appeared in front of Yuan Ping. Looking at Yuan Ping's heartbroken expression and Fen Yun lying on the ground without any breath, he was stunned. He wiped his eyes with his hand, thinking it was a dream. No matter how hard he wiped, he still couldn't erase the real scene in front of him. Impossible. He shook his head, his face full of disbelief. The three of them grew up together, climbed the path to immortality together, and became top powerhouses. They have encountered countless disasters. How could Fen Yun die with such experience? He didn't believe it, so he shook his head desperately. But gradually, he clenched his fists. He didn't shed tears or grieve, just anger. He left here without saying a word. His legs and feet shook, dust and smoke filled the ground, and his anger turned into strength to support him. Take your life. He roared, rising into the air like a giant dragon, and slammed into the middle-aged man high in the air. Seeing this situation, the middle-aged man sneered. The black shadow that originally stayed motionless in the same place turned its head, and the aura from its body collided firmly with this person. In an instant, the two were fighting together. In just a few breaths, they fought for hundreds of rounds, and the terrifying momentum shook the surroundings. The power of countless laws scattered like raindrops. But in the end, as the city lord, he was defeated. He was kicked to the ground by a black shadow and was seriously injured. Don't overestimate your own capabilities. When the middle-aged man saw this scene, his brows were full of disdain. Same as that guy, stupid. Then he glanced at Liang City again and came to the Black Shadow. The Black Shadow that had just had a fierce battle with the city lord once again stood there like a stone statue, motionless. The middle-aged man looked at the black figure with admiration. As expected of being sent by demon race. Such a top-notch demon puppet must have sacrificed several powerful ancient saints. The middle-aged man was secretly stunned, but he couldn't hide the excitement on his face. Then he put his hand up. The next moment, black mist emitted from the Black Shadow, and the black mist flashed with purple thunder and lightning and slowly condensed. Until it becomes a space vortex. Seeing this, the middle-aged man smiled inwardly, then knelt on one knee on the ground, lowered his head, and said in a respectful tone. "My respected master, my subordinate Donkey welcomes you." In an instant, dark clouds rolled in the sky and thunder and lightning raged. The space vortex condensed by the black mist began to shake slowly, and the aura emanating from it made the area darken. Boom, 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 boom. A faint sound of footsteps came from the space vortex. The next moment, the air force vortex began to shake violently again, and an extremely terrifying sound emanated from it. With a bang, the vortex began to grow until it reached a space crack with a diameter of 100 meters. The terrifying coercion emanating from inside is getting heavier and heavier. Suddenly, the faint footsteps began to appear again. I saw a man in black robes stepping out of the space. His face was cold, and his black hair was spread around his waist. He was as cold as a supreme devil. He looked around with emotionless eyes, and an extremely powerful demonic energy slowly emerged from his body. Finally, he fixed his gaze on the middle-aged man kneeling on the ground. Seeing this, he curled his lips slightly and said in a cold tone, "Why did you summon me here?" Hearing this, the middle-aged man showed a flattering look on his face, pointed to Liang City below, and said respectfully, "Master, this is a gift given to you by my subordinates." Upon hearing this, the man in black robe walked up to him and looked at him with a pair of emotionless eyes. "Do you think I will believe it? I gave you the demon puppet. I also gave you what you asked for. You only gave me this little bit and you haven't gotten it yet. Are you treating me as a fool?" Donkey swallowed. The look in his eyes really made him feel scared, but he still nodded. "Master, I didn't lie to you. This city is indeed dedicated to you by me. There are just a few debris left. I will help you clean them up in a while." Snort. The man in black robe sneered, withdrew his eyes, took a breath quietly, looked around and said with satisfaction, "The air in this human realm is much better than that in demon realm. No wonder the adults above value this place so much." Immediately his eyes caught sight of Yuan Ping, who was looking sad below him. He raised his eyebrows, raised his lips and smiled. Interesting, human emotions are indeed interesting. After saying this, he stared at everyone in Liang City. Will he be afraid? I want to take a closer look at these big names. And Zuleng seemed to feel it. He wanted to escape, but found that his body had been locked and he could not escape at all. Zuleng stood under the boulder, sticking his head out from time to look at the scene in mid-air. He opened his hands and moved his thoughts slightly. Zuleng curled his lips. Cut. He opened his palm slightly, and suddenly, an extremely powerful suction force appeared in his hand. It has completely become a living target. The next moment, the black dragon cast with the power of law rushed straight towards the boulder below. You are talking about the powerful ancestor. This person is also the immortal emperor after all. The range of immortal emperor's consciousness is very far. You must be careful not to let him listen later. Even the ice dragon has no other options. The temperament and appearance are indeed somewhat similar, but they are still a bit different from the invincible immortal emperor in my impression. Everyone who was standing in the city suddenly felt that their bodies were out of control, and then they floated involuntarily. How dare a little ant slander me? It's over. But just when the dragon was about to hit Zuleng, some children felt like they were floating in the air and had fun, and started to swim happily in mid-air. But as everyone knows, the man in black robe actually heard it. He frowned and turned to look behind the boulder thousands of miles away. Zuleng felt despair and felt the breath of death. When the ice dragon saw this scene, he shouted. After the fight between the two ended, he walked back. And the Bing Jiao in the dark felt quite helpless when he saw this, and couldn't persuade him, so he had no choice but to do this. Zuleng was stunned for a moment, then stuck his head out to take a look in disbelief, then carefully looked up and down at the man in black robe, and nodded involuntarily. At this time, Zuleng felt regretful. He hit the ground with his hand. If I had known, I wouldn't have slandered him. Hearing the question, the ice dragon secretly nodded. Indeed, I came into contact with a strong man from demon race back then. If nothing else, this person's strength should be immortal emperor. Senior, is that guy in black robe from demon race? Why doesn't he look like a good guy? Hearing this, Bing Jiao suddenly laughed angrily. Together. It's just courting death. Not good. At this time, on a nearly broken mountain peak. What? Is this person the immortal emperor? Zuleng appeared here again. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 484. A giant dragon appears out of thin air. The giant dragon roared angrily and threw out a heavy tail. With a bang, the attacking black dragon was instantly dispersed. Ah! This made Zuleng, who was already desperate, blink when he saw this scene, but he still didn't come back to his senses in shock. But he unconsciously touched his face, looked at his body, and found that he was not dead, he was fine. And the ice dragon in the dark, whose heart was originally raised in his throat, finally relaxed, and looked at Zuleng in amazement. You are so lucky, you were saved by a strong man from the section. A strong man from the sect? Zuleng was stunned and looked quickly. He found that the giant dragon was looking at him curiously with his eyes. And there were 5 figures standing on his back. A white-haired old man at the head also looked at him with a smile, flashed over, patted Zuleng on the shoulder, and said slowly. Boy, if your strength hasn't reached that level in the future, don't speak ill of him in front of such a powerful person. Otherwise, you would have just lost your mind. Hearing this, Zuleng swallowed. He immediately reacted, scratched his head, leaned over and cupped his hands to the white-haired old man in front of him and said, I remember it, but I also want to thank you, Senior, for saving Zuleng's life. When I get stronger, I will definitely repay you. Hearing this, the white-haired old man just smiled and didn't say anything. He turned around and looked up to the sky. His cloudy eyes gradually became sharper, and a faint murderous aura emanated. The ice dragon in the darkness exclaimed, the peak of the ancient saint. High in the sky. Donkey looked at the giant dragon and the 5 figures. His originally sneer expression suddenly changed, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. Law Enforcement Hall. These 3 words exploded in his mind like thunder. He began to be afraid, his expression was extremely unstable, and he began to quietly take a few steps back, as if he wanted to escape. But his figure has long been watched closely by no one. As soon as he made a move, 5 people looked at him coldly. That seems to say, you can't escape. Seeing this scene, Donkey thought to himself, damn it, how did these guys come so fast? Have they been staring at me in the dark? Or maybe they have been in the dark, and I have been watched by them from beginning to end. Thinking of this, his pupils trembled and he became even more frightened. Betrayal of the sect, torture of the sect's disciples and escape from the sect were the 3 major crimes, and he could be nailed to the 5 Thunder Pagoda for execution. But where is the Five Thunder Tower? That was a huge tower built specifically to punish those within the sect who did not obey the rules and betrayed the sect. Once you go up there is no chance of coming down. The reason why the Five Thunder Pagoda is called Burita is that during the execution, one after another heavenly punishment will fall from the heights. The punishment from heaven will torture your human soul, making you unable to live or die. Thinking of this, drop after drop of cold sweat instantly flowed down his forehead. Seeing this scene, the man in black robe on the side looked at him with disdain, a look of disappointment on his face, and then looked down with disdain. Law Enforcement Hall. It seems that you are from the Profound Heaven section. It's really interesting. The man in black robe curled his lips, his expression became increasingly gloomy, he stood with his hands behind his back and said in an indifferent tone. It seems that you have been hiding around here for a long time, right? Otherwise, why would I feel uncomfortable when I came to this place? But you are smart enough to pull that trick, but are you worthy of these people below? Having said this, he shook his head with pity on his face, and then looked at the frightened people in Liang City below with a slight tone of voice. Did you see? Profound Heaven sect has always been self-righteous, but when I was about to attack you just now, they did not stand up, but watched in the dark. Don't you resent such a force? Don't you feel happy for him? If they don't help you today, they will definitely execute you tomorrow. Now you have a chance to join forces with me, and I can protect you from death. Although the voice of the man in black robe was small, it reached the ears of everyone present. Everyone looked at each other and took half a step back. No one dared to come out and loudly accuse Profound Heaven sect of its inaction. After all, they still remembered when the powerful Soul Palace came here, so how could they dare to be arrogant to the leader of the second palace, Profound Heaven sect? The white-haired old man below looked at him like this, but there was a hint of provocation in his eyes. It seems to be saying this method is useless. I, Profound Heaven sect, have never been trapped by the name righteous path. Want moral kidnapping? Is it possible? Seeing that everyone was silent, the man in black robe had cold eyes and dark clouds on his face. He glanced sideways at Donkey and asked in a sinister tone. How is this going? Hearing this, Donkey swallowed, looked at the five people in the distance with panic eyes, and then softly replied. Master, in fact, Profound Heaven sect is a neutral force. He does not belong to the righteous path, so no one in the world dares to criticize Profound Heaven section. As someone who had been in Profound Heaven sect, how could he not know what this force's behavior was like? Neutral force? The man in black robe frowned, his dark eyes turned slightly, and he looked at the people nearby, seeming to be thinking about something. But at this moment, the white-haired old man and 5 other people drove a giant dragon and came to the 2 of them. Seeing the condition of the man in black robe, he stepped out, and the aura of the ancient saint at the peak of his life was directly exuded. But compared with what the man in black robe actually exuded, it was still far behind, and it was simply dwarfed. But so what? The white-haired old man still stood there with his head held high and his eyes without any fear. Like a towering mountain peak, motionless. Seeing this scene, the man in black robe looked at him coldly, with murderous intent in his body, and his voice was low. Interesting, you are not afraid of me. Are you here looking for death? Hearing this, the old man smiled slightly and said calmly. How can I be afraid? This is the human realm. Why should I be afraid of you, a demon race thief? If you say the ones who are scared, it should be you too. Do you really think that I, Profound Heaven sect, don't know what you demon race thief has been doing these days? Do you really think that I, Profound Heaven sect, are being fooled around by you? Hee hee. The old man sneered. They had known about Donkey's connection with demon race for a long time and were just waiting for an opportunity to lure them out. Speaking of this, he looked sharply at Donkey, who was hiding behind the man in black robe, and shouted. Donkey. As the law enforcement elder of the sect, you dare to betray the sect in public and collude with demon race, and cover up your nephew to harm the disciples in the sect and destroy the sect's innocence. Do you know your guilt? The palace master's order has been issued. If you continue to insist on it, don't blame me. Of course, if you surrender and turn back, we can leave you a complete corpse. Otherwise, you can spend the rest of your life at the Five Thunder Pagoda. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 485. Hearing this, Donkey was shocked and his eyes began to show fear, as if he wanted to surrender. He didn't want to endure this kind of torture. If so, it was better to let him die. Thinking of this, he actually had the intention of committing suicide. But as soon as he moved, the giant dragon's eyes immediately focused on him, and the terrifying dragon power emanating from his body suppressed him and made him unable to move. Like a mouse locked in a cage. His mind was shaken, his limbs were weak, and he couldn't follow his own thoughts at all. Want to die? Huh, it's not up to you. If you want to die, you have to die in the 9 nether purgatory of Profound Heaven sect, not here. Seeing that Donkey was thinking of committing suicide, a middle-aged man sneered and felt disdainful. Then he and the remaining 3 people appeared in front of the white-haired old man. And at this moment, the auras of the 5 people began to slowly gather, forming a confrontation with the aura of the man in black robe. But how could the power of the immortal emperor be compared to that of the ancient saint? In just a few breaths, the 5 people were instantly shaken away. At this moment, the giant dragon on the side turned into a man wearing a long blue coat and came to the 5 people. He looked at the man in black robe with burning eyes, and the terrifying dragon power was released without any hesitation. You're just a demon race bastard, come on, fight me. Hearing these words, the man in black robe was suddenly startled, his eyes half squinted, and the murderous intention in his body was completely radiated at this moment. The powerful murderous intent is like the coming of the 9 nether purgatory, causing people to see scenes of terror, panic, and fear. And this murderous intention also affected the operation of laws in this area. The next moment, one after another great Dao laws were seen coming, and the whole world suddenly began to turn into thunderclouds and extremely dark. The people in Liang city below also began to flee in all directions again, some hiding in houses and some hiding underground. Seeing this scene, the dragon race immortal emperor smiled and dared to accompany him even if he dared to hit him. The next moment, he clenched his fists and looked arrogantly, like a god of war, while the dragon-shaped shadow gradually emerged behind him. In an instant, there was a commotion in the sky. The sky that was originally covered with dark clouds suddenly dispersed. I saw an extremely huge black dragon born under the infusion of the great Dao of law. And hovering high in the sky, roaring. Roar. The sound was extremely concussive and spread throughout hundreds of millions of miles. Then the giant dragon looked here, and the terrifying power of law slowly wandered around the dragon, like one servant after another. Seeing this, Dragon Race Immortal Emperor smiled slightly, clenched his fist again, and then raised his eyes to look at the man in black robe. Try this move. As soon as the words fell, the black dragon in the sky rushed straight down instantly, and its huge roar shook thousands of miles and resounded throughout the immortal domain. But how could the man in black robe be afraid? The demonic energy around him surged with terrifying momentum, controlling the demonic clouds high in the sky and transforming into a black vortex. He poured all his mana into it, and within a few breaths, the whirlpool instantly grew larger and made a loud sound. Dong dong dong. The vortex began to flow slowly, and an extremely pungent and disgusting smell emitted from the spatial vortex. I saw countless corpses flowing along one side. At this time, the black dragon had already arrived. The man in black robe looked at the black dragon solemnly, opened his hands, and the whirlpool grew larger again in his arms. It seemed that he wanted to swallow this black dragon. But is it really possible? Only the next moment. Boom! Dust and smoke are everywhere. The two collided violently, and the rolling waves shook the surroundings, causing the originally dilapidated earth to begin to break apart again. It turned into a cave with a diameter of 100 meters. In the blink of an eye, the dust and smoke slowly dispersed. The dragon race immortal emperor looked at him with a solemn expression, and then his face lit up with joy, knowing that he had won. The black dragon's body is too big to be swallowed by space. Unless it opens the door to the void space and transmits it to the outer world. But opening the door to the void space requires time to accumulate, and it simply cannot be completed with the current amount of time. So the next moment, the man in black robe was seen being hit repeatedly by the black dragon, and he could not stop until he smashed hundreds of mountains. Ah! The man in black robe suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and lay in a miserable state among the rubble. Finally, he stood up, clutching the pain, clenching his fists, and staring at the dragon race immortal emperor in the sky with a pair of dark eyes. Damn it, is dragon race's body that powerful? I'm a higher level first layer than him, but I can't even beat him. The man in black robe was a little angry, but he had no other choice. After thinking for a while, he finally sighed helplessly. There is no other way but to use that trick. He looked at his hands, his eyes instantly rioted, scarlet murderous aura rolled around, setting off a hurricane. A deep magic circle instantly rose under his feet, followed by waves of black mist. Black mist spread around and tightly enveloped his body. People outside can't tell what's going on inside. Seeing this scene, the dragon race expert frowned. But the next moment, in the blink of an eye, the black mist dispersed, and the man in black robe began to grow in size until he turned into a giant. The troll's body exudes surging demonic energy, which is as continuous as a stormy sea. In an instant, this area fell into darkness. The terrifying power of law spread out like a spider web. The troll roared. Roar. The voice is like the Shura demon god in hell, making people tremble with fear and make them gasp for breath. Come, let's fight with me. The troll raised his eyes to look at the strong dragon race man, clenched his fists as big as the sky, and appeared in front of the strong dragon race man in an instant, like a strong wind, and blasted him with all his strength. Dragon race's face tightened when he saw this strong man, and he hurriedly resisted. There was a boom. He was knocked back directly and suffered some minor injuries. So strong. When he transformed into his true form, he was more than twice as strong as before. The strong dragon race man was shocked, but he was not afraid. The momentum he exuded also soared upwards at this moment, reaching its peak. Gradually, he also transformed into his true form and became a giant dragon. The few people staying nearby had left the place early when the two were fighting. The battle between the powerful immortal emperor is not something they can wait and see. However, a law enforcement elder still informed the strong men of the sect and explained the situation here. Perhaps before too long, this demon race strongman will be besieged. After all, who made him so arrogant that he dared to come to the human realm alone? In the next moment, there was a fierce rotation between the two. Looking from a distance, it looked like two meteors colliding non-stop, and the sound exploded, causing a sensation in the area. Because of the fight between the two, the laws began to break until they were completely destroyed, and the great Dao of the region also began to rotate irregularly. The 4 seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter are constantly changing, regardless of priority. Sometimes it is cold, sometimes it is hot, sometimes it is cold, and sometimes it is refreshing. It was okay at first, but gradually some people couldn't hold it anymore. Donkey, who was high in the air, looked at the scene in surprise, then reacted, glanced around and wanted to run away. But before he could make any move, the next moment, 2 powerful figures appeared next to him. The figure stood on one side, tightly controlling his figure, making him unable to move. Donkey was shocked, but he also knew who the visitor was. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 486. The two people beside him are the same elders of the law enforcement hall as he was back then. Unfortunately, now. Donkey smiled bitterly. I didn't expect that it would be you who came to arrest me. It's been such a long time since I last saw you. Your strength has improved a lot. Hearing this, the old man on his left glanced at him with a disappointed look on his face, and then said seriously. Donkey, don't say anything about friendship. The mistakes you made are irreparable. We have advised you before, but you didn't listen and went your own way. Is it too late to regret now? Hee. Donkey smiled in despair. Yes, it's too late to regret. In the end, he gave up all means of resistance. Let the two of them do whatever they want. Seeing this, the two looked at each other, nodded and took him away. At this moment, there was another vibration in the nearby space. The next moment, three powerful figures stepped out. The originally chaotic laws were instantly shattered by the aura emanating from them. They all wore gold silk robes and hung a token around their waists with the word sacrifice written on it. That's right, the three of them are the powerful men of the enshrinement hall. The second one is dedicated to breaking thousands of troops, and the third one is dedicated to Kuichi Anfeng. Under Tugayan's persuasion, Kuichi Anfeng finally chose to join the Profound Heaven sect and became a strong man in the enshrinement hall. And the last person is Kifeng Yunhai. The three of them looked around, and finally fixed their gaze on the two men who were fighting fiercely not far away. Seeing this scene, Po Kinjun smiled, with a strong fighting spirit in his eyes, but he did not take action immediately. But just wait and see. The sea of clouds beside him said. This demon race immortal emperor is so arrogant. He broke into the human realm alone. I really don't know if this guy is smart or stupid. Yes, Po Kinjun on the side also nodded in agreement. This guy is indeed too stupid and underestimates our Profound Heaven section. I didn't know how to cause trouble for these people before, but now this guy shows up at my door. Having said this, he twisted his body and clenched his fists, his eyes lit up, he looked at the two people beside him and whispered. Leave this guy to me. Just watch. I want to see how powerful demon race is in his true form. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure disappeared from the spot and came to the side of the two people who were fighting fiercely. Seeing this situation, the two of them covered their foreheads and were speechless, but they didn't say much and chose to wait and see. At this moment, Po Kinjun clenched his fists and exuded a surging momentum, like a god of war descending from the sky. Demon race bastard, come and fight me. The troll who was fighting fiercely heard this and punched the giant dragon in front of him away, then raised his eyes and looked up. He looked at the figure of the heaven pottering army and his face was shocked. He said something bad in his heart, and looked not far away. There were two powerful immortal emperors staring at him closely. The troll gasped slightly and suddenly felt the pressure doubled. The person in front of him is the immortal emperor, plus the dragon and the two guys over there. There are 4 immortal emperors. He couldn't defeat it alone. Thinking of this, the troll was a little angry, but he had no other choice. He glared at the giant dragon across from him. You and I are fighting, and you actually call someone, are you still a strong dragon race? Hearing this, the giant dragon said nothing, just hovered and looked at him quietly. Asshole. Seeing that the giant dragon ignored him, the troll cursed secretly and looked at Po Kinjun beside him. Po Kinjun raised his eyebrows at him, his eyes seeming to say, do you want to change your opponent? But the troll turned a blind eye and clenched his fist. He now has no extra mana to fight with the person in front of him. If he continues to fight, he will gain nothing at all. Thinking of this, his dark eyes turned slightly, and then he took a step back and crushed something. Boom! The next moment, the nearby space suddenly began to vibrate violently again, and a narrow crack slowly opened. A low growling sound suddenly came from inside. The next moment, countless black shadows rushed out from it, all of them exuding a terrifying aura. In just a few breaths, black shadows covered the area like dark clouds. Seeing this scene, Po Jun's originally amused expression suddenly became tense, and with a movement of his hand, a long knife appeared in his hand. Several great Dao laws also appeared around him. The terrifying imperial power emanating from his body drove all these black shadows away one by one. In the past 10 years, his strength has reached the Immortal Emperor 8th layer, almost approaching the Immortal Emperor 9th layer. What's more, he also mastered the law of chaos. Demon puppet. The two people in the distance were slightly shocked when they saw this. Kui Qianfeng looked solemn when he saw the scene and murmured, "I didn't expect demon race to make so many demon puppets, and there were 1 or 2 Immortal Emperor demon puppets in it. I'm afraid those 2 Immortal Emperor level demon puppets were taken out of some grave by demon race. Oh, this kind of thing used to be done by the second palace, but it's a pity that these 2 forces have gone somewhere Yunhai sighed." Kui Qianfeng on the side suddenly smiled when he heard this. When the troll saw this scene, he secretly laughed. Be prepared to find an opportunity to escape. All the aura on his body was released at this moment. What follows will be an unprecedented fight. Boom! But will Zhuolong and Po Jun give him a chance? The troll lay there covered in blood, looking pale. The troll hit the ground with great force. Boom! 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 But it wasn't over yet. The huge dragon on the side also rose into the sky and rushed down with a strong momentum. In the blink of an eye, Po Jun appeared in front of him with a long knife in his hand, aiming at his chest and stabbing him hard. Boom! The troll couldn't resist and was hit, and its figure was smashed downwards like a mountain. A radius of 10 miles turned into an abyss of caves, like a huge tomb. If I had known this, why would I do it in the first place? Cough. Several roars resounded across the sky. At this time, several people were fighting with a bunch of demon puppets with relaxed expressions, but with a wave of their hands, the demon puppets were killed and wounded in pieces. The troll was hit by a knife and spit out a mouthful of blood. Only the 2 Immortal Emperor level devils took a little longer. Am I going to die here? Instantly appeared in the middle of all the demon puppets, and used the powerful Great Dao Law to violently attack them. The next moment, the 2 people moved. Hearing this, Yunhai nodded solemnly. The troll has regretted it, he was too arrogant and arrogant. Ah! After fighting against the giant dragon, imagining his true form, and then summoning the space, he had already consumed a lot of mana and could no longer hold on. How could he withstand the full blow of the 2 powerful immortal emperors? Okay, it's time to get down to business, so that you can go back and report to the sect master. The situation is not optimistic. The key is to go back, the demon lord will definitely not spare him. Yunhai on the side also nodded in agreement, each took out his immortal weapon, ready to go. The troll looked at his palm, feeling desperate. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 487. After a while, the battle finally ended. Several people stepped here. Seeing the desolate appearance of the troll, Po Jun crossed his arms and said coldly, "I really admire you for being so courageous." Hearing this, the troll gave him a cold look. "If you hadn't besieged me, how could I be afraid or lose to you?" Hearing this, Po Jun smiled and did not answer. "Why should we challenge each other when we can encircle Europe?" Immediately he stepped over, just when he wanted to take the troll away. The next moment, a black light and shadow rushed out from nowhere like a long sword. Feeling the fatal threat behind him, Potion suddenly broke into a cold sweat and hurriedly hid aside. Aha! The light and shadow passed by him and hit the mountain peak not far away. With a bang, the mountain peak was instantly shattered by this move. Seeing this scene, the giant dragon frowned, turned into a human body and glanced behind him. I found that there was no one else, as if this light and shadow appeared out of thin air. Yunhai also came over and asked with concern. "Are you injured?" Hearing this, Po Kinjun glanced at him and shook his head. "No, I was just shocked and broke into a cold sweat." "That's good." Yunhai breathed a sigh of relief and looked around with a puzzled look on his face. There was obviously no one here, so where did that light and shadow come from? Kui Jianfeng on the side seemed to sense something, his eyes trembled, and he blurted out, "Ancestor! Ancestor!" Yunhai glanced at Kui Jianfeng, his heart was slightly shaken, and he asked hesitantly. "Is it possible that the blow just now was delivered by the ancestor?" Kui Jianfeng came back to his senses, looked at him, nodded solemnly, and replied. "Yes, I'm sure it's the ancestor, because no one can cross the border and launch an offensive except the ancestor. The ancestor has perfectly mastered the application of the laws of heaven and earth and the rules of the great Dao. He can control a domain and make his moves manifest on the other side." Hearing this, Yunhai was startled. He looked at the troll beside him and asked in surprise. "In that case, the name just now was..." But before he finished speaking, an extremely powerful pressure radiated out from nowhere. The terrifying aura instantly knocked the four people to the ground. The next moment, a space vortex emerged out of thin air. I saw a man wearing a black robe, with a haughty face, and a hint of cold air walking out of it. Seeing this situation, Kui Jianfeng raised his head with a painful expression. Pupils tremble. The demon emperor's blood is flawless. "What? It's him." Po Kinjun looked at the person with a shocked expression. At this moment, Shui Wuxia stood with his hands behind his back, his feet in the air, staring at several people with a pair of eyes without any emotion. Then he looked at the troll lying on the ground not far away. His eyes were startled, and then he shook his head in disappointment. "If you act on your own initiative without authorization, you should go back and accept the Lord Demon Lord's treatment properly." After that, he waved his hand, controlled the laws, and disappeared here with the body of the troll, without attacking a few people. Seeing the disappearing Shui Wuxia, several people looked puzzled, a little surprised and in disbelief. "It's strange that he didn't attack us." Even Kui Jianfeng shook his head in confusion. Maybe he also knows that this is the human realm. Besides, the battle just now has alarmed the ancestor of the human race. If he forcibly attacks us, I'm afraid he will be unable to leave here. Hearing this, several people looked at each other. Maybe. Then several people also left here. A few days later, what demon race did in the human realm naturally spread widely, causing the world to make a lot of noise. At this moment, holy state. The human temple. In the majestic review hall, Emperor Lin stood with his hands behind his back, standing in a high position, with a majestic look on his face. I saw only two places in the main hall, where all the high-level officials of the human race temple gathered. A man wearing a white robe and a long beard stood up, looked at Lin respectfully and said, "Hall Master, demon race has been too arrogant recently. Do you really think that everyone in our human race can succeed? Not only did he wantonly arrest Xiaotu in my human race, he even broke into the immortal domain alone without caring about the majesty of our human race's temple. If Profound Heaven Sect and other powerful people hadn't stopped them in the end, I'm afraid that place would have become a place where dead bones are buried. So I'm asking for orders, and I hope that the Palace Master can launch an attack on the demon race and destroy the demon race in the 10 domains. Let our human race be truly liberated." As soon as these words came out, everyone else followed and echoed. "Palace Master, what Yun Tian Tian said is right. It's time to crack down on demon race's arrogance, otherwise he will really think that our human temple does not exist. Seeing everyone speaking with indignation, Dylan's face didn't change much, it was still as calm as water, but he still nodded and replied. Well, you should first ask the two ancestors about this matter to see if they have any opinions. If the two ancestors agree, then I will naturally agree as well. After hearing this, everyone looked at each other and nodded. As commanded. Within a few quarters of an hour, the two ancestors agreed to the matter, and the news that the human temple was preparing to take action against demon race spread widely in an instant. At this time profound heaven sect. Inside the splendid and majestic Tianqian Hall, Qin Xian was at the top of the list, looking at everyone present with a majestic look. I saw all the powerful men in Tianqian Hall bending down and shouting respectfully. I'll wait to see the sect leader. Qin Xian nodded slightly, his expression unchanged. At this time, the great elder Ling Wu, who was ranked first on the left, stood up, leaned over and cupped his hands and said, Sect Master, now that the human temple has launched a war with demon race, what should I, profound heaven sect, do to? After all, now is the best time to eliminate demon race. Besides, we now have two trump cards, Dragon Race and Tiandao Temple. When demon race is destroyed, the current human race temple, 7 Kills Temple, will not be our opponent at all. Hearing this, others also stood up. Sect Master, what the great elder said is right, please give the order. Please ask the Sect Master to issue an order. The rest of the people stood up and bowed their hands. Seeing this, Qin Xian's expression changed, and he nodded immediately and said, Okay, in that case, all the top executives of Profound Heaven Sect will go out together to launch an attack on Demon Race Domain 2. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 488. After hearing this, everyone's expressions changed, and then they shouted loudly. I will obey the orders of the Sect Master. Seeing this, Qin Xian didn't say anything. Only the 8 peak masters stayed and waved their hands, get out. After saying that, the senior officials nodded respectfully, and their figures suddenly turned into several streaks of light and disappeared into the hall. At this time, the news of the preparations to attack demon race reached the ears of all the disciples and elders of Profound Heaven Sect in only half a quarter of an hour. The disciples and elders of the inner sect, the outer sect, and the handymen were stunned, with surprise and shock in their eyes. At this moment, everyone started talking to each other. 2 figures were entrenched on a mountain peak. The sect leader's attack on demon race this time may have been premeditated, but judging from the current power of the sect, demon race should be unstoppable. What's more, the human temple also launched an attack on them. The person on the side nodded solemnly, and then there was a strong murderous intention on his face. I have endured the demon race for destroying my home for 10 years. I must seek revenge on them. Seeing this, the man sighed and patted him on the shoulder. On the other side, there are the inner disciples. I have long disliked those demon race guys. Today the sect leader issued an order. I will be the first to appear and tear them into pieces one by one, a strong man in green robes said sternly. The strength of the immortal sovereign realm bloomed perfectly at this moment. The others didn't say anything when they saw this scene, but all looked at Tianqian Hall, which was at the top. At this time, inside Tianqian Hall, the 8 peak masters stayed in the center of the hall with respectful expressions. Qin Xian looked at them with their hands behind their backs and said, We have captured 6 of the 10 major realms, and they are all controlled by the second palace. And among the remaining 4 realms, except for the demon race realm, the other 2 realms only have the evil beast realm, which is not easy to move. But now the war is coming, and I can't wait any longer. I let you stay today because I want you to go to the evil beast realm and pass the news to Gong Mo so that he can take action. and you and others will cooperate with him to take full control of monster race. After hearing this, several people nodded solemnly, yes. Seeing this, Qin Xian waved to them. Go. Immediately, the figures of several people turned into streams of light and left here. After a few people left, Qin Xian stood at the front of the hall and looked into the distance, his eyes flashed with a hint of golden light, and he whispered. The opportunity has arrived, I wonder how you, demon race, can resist. A few days passed in the blink of an eye. At this time, Demon Realm is in the extremely dark Demon Palace. Only high places are visible. The Demon Lord was wearing a black robe, sitting there with a cold face, looking down at the people below with a pair of emotionless eyes. At this time, there was silence in the Demon Palace, except for the faint sound of breathing. After pondering for a long time, the Demon Lord stood up, looked at everyone with their hands behind their hands and whispered, the Human Race Temple and the Profound Heaven Sect launched an attack on my demon race a few days ago. Do you all know it? After hearing this, everyone nodded with unchanged expressions. He, this is quite interesting. A sneer suddenly appeared on the Demon Lord's face, and he immediately looked at the crowd on the left, and saw a cowering man among them. Seeing this, the Demon Lord moved and appeared in front of him instantly like a ghost. He raised his hand to lift his neck and looked at him coldly. If you hadn't made your own decisions and done some provocative things in the human realm, how could I, demon race, be besieged by these two forces? But in the end he let go and didn't kill him. I will spare your life today, but next time, don't blame me for not remembering your past kindness. Hundreds of giant ferry boats appeared here, with several battle flags on them. The battle flags had the words heaven, earth, and people written on them. Master, the order has been issued from above, let us attack immediately. At this time, the Demon Lord stared at him closely, with a pair of plain eyes that made it impossible to guess what he was thinking. I saw a man wrapped in golden armor coming here. He bent down and cupped his hands to the old man in front of him and said, my blood demons will definitely try their best to stop them and won't let them touch my demon race realm at all. Also, those demon puppets that I asked you to make before are quickly made one by one. Do you understand? Yes, the man in golden armor nodded slightly and left here with a serious expression. All the black shadows themselves exude terrifying strength, and there is no trace of fear of demon race in their eyes. Now that there is a powerful enemy, a powerful immortal emperor is very important. Killing him will have no effect, but will cause shock to others. Hearing this, he looked happy and nodded gratefully. That being the case, I don't want to say anything more. Although the main battle this time is against the blood demon, you must also start cooperating without any slack. After a long time, the sound of footsteps came from behind the old man. But after pondering for a long time, he didn't know how to respond, and lowered his head with a slightly timid look. Upon hearing this, the demon race immortal emperor's eyes flashed, and then he knelt down on one knee and nodded firmly. Hearing the demon lord's emotionless voice, the immortal emperor's face suddenly tightened and he swallowed. On the immortal boat, all the disciples of the three sects had serious expressions and looked at the demon realm across from them in anticipation. At this moment, I saw the border of demon realm on the ferry boat at the front. But there was no emotion on the demon lord's face, and he continued, however, the death penalty can be avoided, but the living penalty cannot be escaped, so this time the main battle will be up to you to stop the attacks of the two major forces. In just a few breaths, black shadows flew out from the ferry boat one after another, and suddenly filled the sky like dark clouds. After everyone heard this, they all nodded respectfully and said, yes. The armies of demon race's second domain also began to slowly gather. Have you forgotten what I taught you before? Then he left here. Hearing this, the old man's face moved slightly, turned around, looked at him, and nodded. It seemed like they would rush out the next moment. Not surprisingly, these are the three major forces of the human gate, the earth gate, and the Tian gate. I understand, let's do it. An old man wearing a white robe, with loose hair hanging around his waist, and cloudy eyes stood here, motionless like a stone statue. As a demon lord, he naturally understood this, so he immediately threw him underground, turned around, and said coldly. Seeing this, the rest of the people shook their heads helplessly and did not speak for him. After all, there was nothing to help him and it was purely his own fault. Seeing this, the demon lord nodded slightly, then looked at the people in the hall and said in a deep voice. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 489. This situation has long been observed by the powerful demon race. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of demonic figures appeared in the sky. All of them looked at the people opposite them with ferocious expressions and red eyes. The killing intent emanating from his body was like a Shura coming out of hell. The lowest strength of these people has reached celestial immortal or above. The tallest one is the previous immortal emperor. That is the blood demon. At this moment, the blood demon was wearing a broad robe, and his dark eyes were looking at the people from the three sects opposite, with some disdain on his face. But I was more disappointed. Because the people from Profound Heaven sect haven't arrived here yet. But the problem was not big, and then he sharpened his eyes and waved his hand. Boom! Suddenly, the power of the surrounding laws was like a dragon cloud spitting mist, turning into black magic soldiers one after another and rushing towards that direction. See this scene. A middle-aged man stood up immediately, looked at these black magic soldiers seriously, and shouted behind him. Array up! Hurry! As soon as these words came out, several formation mages immediately stood up and set up a defensive formation. Boom! 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 There were 4 collisions in a row, and all the demonic soldiers were blocked out, but this was just a test of them by the blood demon. Then a black fireball condensed in his hand and he threw it in this direction without hesitation. I saw that the defensive array was blown to pieces in an instant, and the flames rushed into the crowd, but in an instant, everyone was firmly engulfed by the flames. Some ants dare to act recklessly in front of me. Do you really think that you can stop them if you learn some small formations? Blood Demon said disdainfully. Seeing this scene, the old man in white robe on the ferry boat frowned. The powerful immortal emperor was not something he could resist, so he crushed a jade talisman without hesitation. After a moment, there was a shaking in the nearby space, and a man with a strong build and outstanding appearance stepped out of it. The aura emanating from his body directly dissipated the flames just now, and he also had the intention of fighting back. Oh! Seeing this, the blood demon showed a hint of amusement at the corner of his mouth, and a bloody long knife appeared in his hand. How can a mere immortal emperor third layer fight with me? As soon as he finished speaking, his body appeared directly in front of the man across the space and stabbed him in the chest. At this critical moment, the old man in white robe quickly opened the magic circle to prevent this momentum from affecting them. With my own training space, Great Deo, and my extremely powerful skills, I can naturally fight the demon race immortal emperor for several rounds. You are indeed a waste. I just gave you a small blow and knocked you back hundreds of meters. You are so weak. I saw the knife in the blood demon's hand constantly blasting in front of the man opposite, and the sound of tearing could be heard all around. After all, the man's hand was not a blue sword. At the same time, the battle between the two powerful immortal emperors naturally attracted the attention of all major forces. Hearing this, the others nodded repeatedly. That was indeed the case. What the hell is this? Isn't he a powerful immortal emperor? Why was he knocked back by demon race immortal emperor with a single blow? Okay, Let's try again. The next moment, waves of great Deo power gathered around him, as if something was about to emerge. As soon as he said this, someone began to answer him, because this person is not an ordinary immortal emperor. It is said that he is the disciple of a powerful ancestor in the human race temple. When the old man in white robes saw this, he frowned and clenched his fist tightly in his palm, but he had no other choice. Hearing this, the man not far away immediately gritted his teeth and looked at the blood demon with an angry expression. Roared, "Come again." At this scene, everyone was shocked for a moment. But he will definitely lose in the end. After all, from my point of view, this demon race immortal emperor has not yet exerted his full strength. Okay, since you want to play, I will accompany you. Hearing this, the blood demon shook hands, glanced at him with disdain, and said coldly, "I haven't even shown my full strength, and you started to exaggerate. Do you really think you are strong?" At that moment, the two collided instantly. Half a quarter of an hour later, the two of them released a move with all their strength and stepped back a few meters from each other. Seeing this, the man snorted coldly. Some people began to be disappointed, and some people began to retreat slowly. The original fiery hearts disappeared in an instant, replaced only by panic. Seeing that the man was easily repelled by him, the blood demon showed a trace of complacency on his face, crossed his arms, and said disdainfully, "I advise you to let your deputy palace master come, just because you are not my opponent. After all, his strength is only at the peak of the ancient saint." As soon as the two immortal emperors fought, demon race's immortal emperor pushed back their fairyland, which affected the morale of the army. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm out of strength. One by one, they were lurking in the void and watching quietly. The man was shocked, but he couldn't dodge and was hit directly by the attack. He vomited blood from his mouth and took dozens of steps back. I saw an old man looking at the scene just now, with a look of surprise in his eyes. Which immortal emperor is this? Can he actually be inseparable from the strong immortal emperor of demon race? In just a few moments, hundreds of rounds were fought. Logically speaking, demon race's immortal emperor seems to be stronger than him. You just made a sneak attack to seize the force. If I hadn't been careless, no one would have been the one to retreat now. The roar continued. The two were fighting inseparably, and the terrifying momentum shook thousands of miles, causing a group of low-strength people to feel dizzy. The sound of conversation and discussion suddenly broke out. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 490. I saw that the two people in the field were already engaged in a fierce battle. Boom. 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 The sound of fighting spread all around, causing a group of young disciples to scream in surprise and look at them with fiery eyes. This time the blood demon didn't hold back. The momentum all over the body rose until it reached its peak. The next moment, a terrifying aura emanated from his body, and a thick dark law appeared from his hands, wandering around like a long river. In an instant, the immortal emperor was tightly wrapped in black mist before he could react, and fell into endless darkness. Seeing this scene, the blood demon sneered, his eyes became more murderous, and he once again held the sword in his hand, as if he wanted to behead him with one blow. But at this moment, the blade of the sword was blocked, and an old man with an immortal spirit appeared here instantly, and easily repelled the blood demon with a flick of his sleeves. And he was seriously injured. "Who?" Blood demon suddenly frowned and shouted. The old man looked at him without saying a word, as if the blood demon in front of him was nothing more than an ant in his eyes. The old man's palm moved slightly, and the man was instantly released from the law of darkness. At the moment of release, he spit out a mouthful of blood, raised his head slightly, and saw the figure of the old man. The man looked startled, then lowered his head and shouted respectfully, "Master." "Disciple, I've let you down." A trace of shame appeared on his face. Seeing this scene, the old man nodded slightly, smiled, and said, "It's okay, your strength is not comparable to him. It's normal to lose. When you practice better in the future, you will definitely be able to defeat him. I asked you to come out today just to see how strong you are, and now you have met the conditions that satisfy me as a teacher. So let's leave everything to my master." The man nodded heavily and stepped aside respectfully. Immediately, the old man raised his eyes and looked at the blood demon, and the majestic aura emanating from his body rushed directly towards him. With a bang, the blood demon was suppressed by the breath and couldn't move, and his muscles began to tighten and tear. "Ah!" The blood demon began to scream, and blood spurted out from his body. Finally died suddenly. This. Everyone was shocked, their eyes full of horror. Who is this? With just one momentum, he can kill a demon race immortal emperor in an instant. Is he the powerful ancestor? Everyone was talking to each other and discussing. At the same time, the demon race immortal emperor in the dark saw the scene and was stunned with a look of disbelief on his face. Then one of them crushed a magic talisman. The next moment, the nearby space shook. A man wearing black clothes, with a cold face, and exuding an arrogant aura stepped out. The demonic aura emanating from his body was like a long river, rolling and flowing, and the aura of the old man began to collide with each other, regardless of the top or bottom. Seeing this scene, the old man frowned and looked at the visitor solemnly. Finally, he seemed to have thought of something and blurted out, "The demon emperor's blood is flawless." Hearing these words, Shwewuxia held his head high, looked around with his eyes, and stood with his hands behind his back. The aura of his body overwhelmed the whole audience, pushing him thousands of miles away, making the strong men's hearts rise and become irresistible. This is the domineering power and coercion of the powerful ancestor. Although the immortal emperor is strong, he cannot compete with it. Shwewuxia raised his eyes to look at the old man, looked him up and down and said, "You should be Guanyi of the human race temple, right?" Hearing this, Guanyi nodded slightly, "So what?" Shwewuxia sneered and looked at him with murderous intent, "You are very presumptuous. In the competition between the mighty immortal emperor, you bullied the weak and attacked me, demon race immortal emperor. And also killed him. Since you did so, don't blame me for not telling you." So. Shwewuxia's eyes sharpened, and the next moment, his figure appeared behind the man like a ghost. The palm of his hand stabbed into the man's back like a sharp claw, crushing his heart and internal organs one by one, before finally withdrawing it. Then he returned to the original place extremely cool and domineering. Just like that, the man suddenly lost his breath and collapsed to the ground. Seeing this scene, Guan Yi's eyes trembled and he shouted, "No, lure." Ah! Guan Yi looked sad and wailed. Seeing this situation, other strong men who came one after another couldn't help but lower their heads, with a trace of remorse on their faces. When the demon race strongman here saw this scene, he burst into laughter and cheered continuously. The demon emperor is mighty, the demon emperor's merits will last forever. Good kill, good kill. All demon race strongmen exclaimed in unison. Such taunting laughter was like a sharp knife piercing into the strong men here. They looked angry but helpless. Seeing Guan Yi like this, Shwewuxia curled up the corner of his mouth with a gloomy expression, and then smiled, "Ha ha, how do you feel, old man? Are you sad to see your disciple die in front of your eyes? Do you really want to kill me?" Ah! Hearing Shwewuxia's sarcastic laugh, Guan Yi's eyes gradually turned cold, and the murderous intent that reached the sky broke through the sky, and powerful pressure spread across the entire audience. In an instant, a terrifying shadow emerged from behind him. The figure's whole body glowed, and it instantly reached a height of 10,000 feet. It exuded a terrifying aura, like Shura coming to the world. Guan Yi also puffed up his chest, his white hair flowing away, and several phantoms of sword energy appeared around his body. He said in a cold tone, "Then let me see if you, Demon Emperor Shwewuxia, can defeat me." After the words fell, Guan Yi stepped out, with several meteor-like fireballs flashing all over his body, and the great Dao Law descended in front of him and slowly flowed. The huge power of space spread across hundreds of millions of miles, and the whole world suddenly fell into chaos. Seeing this, everyone watching the battle quickly stood up to avoid it, with panic on their faces. They almost died there. Seeing this scene, Shwewuxia curled his lips. Without fear, a black spear appeared in his hand, and struck with a horizontal blow. With a roar, the terrifying pressure was instantly blasted away, and a huge dragon began to slowly wander around Shwewuxia. The demon dragon roared low and unleashed a powerful pressure. The terrifying aura made the three powerful men retreat and vomit blood. As expected of the powerful ancestor. I don't know how many times more powerful than the immortal emperor. A mere momentum can seriously injure a bunch of powerful men. The ancient sage who watched secretly was amazed. At this time, 4 voices came from thousands of miles away. Chirp. Roar. Ouch. Roar. Hearing such a loud voice, everyone quickly looked up. I saw the 4 divine beasts, azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise, exuding terrifying pressure, all appearing in the sky. On their backs, there were dozens of figures standing. The aura exuding from each of them is that of an immortal emperor. Who are these people? They are driving the 4 great beasts here. When one person saw this situation, his eyes showed wonder.